Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, we are here. I'm here with Kathleen for another NFP in Real Life episode. We are going to do some story sharing and we're probably going to laugh. And I hope that you just come away from this episode like with your heart filled with funny stories about kids and NFP. And
yes,
when you're living NFP and your stuff's around, what happened?
What sorts of things go down?
So Kathleen, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of the best story we have. I think, okay. So I think that in the last 6 months, I've been studying to become a FEM instructor. And it was so funny. There was one day, I was doing the courses and everything. Like every week we had our lectures. And so I would have like my time where I would like kind of lock myself away and my husband would handle like the kids and everything. And then I would do the homework like later on in the week, usually when the kids were like around or doing whatever. And they came up to me and they asked one time, like, Mommy, what are you doing? Like, what are these like classes you're taking? Because I would say like, oh, I'm just had to do like homework or whatever. And they're like, well, what do you mean you have homework? What kind of homework do you have?
You're a mommy. You don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have homework. What is that about? So the one day I was like doing stuff and they were asking me like, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you studying? What are you like looking at? So I happened to be on a slide of like the female anatomy and just kind of like, right. Like, it was just like, you guys want to know? Like, yeah, let's talk about it. Right. So, and I had like talked to my oldest, who's 8, around the time she was like 6 or 7. I had like kind of talked to her about like, periods and like stuff like that. Like she kind of like knew about it or like had heard it. But my 6-year-old son at the time, 6, was like, this was like all new information to him. So, we're like going through and we're talking and I'm basically like walking through a cycle, like with the image in front of us, just like, okay, so you have these ovaries, women have these ovaries, and inside the ovaries are the eggs. And what happens is once every month, these hormones and the egg, and it travels through the fallopian tube and it'll get fertilized or not fertilized. And you just walking through like a whole cycle with the kids. And they're just like wide-eyed, like, okay. All right. They're just like looking and it's like, yeah. And like, that's how babies are made. That's how, blah, 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 whatever. So we're just like going through the thing. Didn't really have too many questions. And I was like, yeah, so I'm basically studying to be able to teach other people about this and how to identify when these things are happening in your body, around the time that they're happening, because our body gives us these signs and these signals and whatever. So they carry on with their day, whatever. And then, I don't know, maybe like a week later, Gabriel, my 6-year-old, he's reading these books. They're like these graphic novels and about like different historical events. So he comes up to me with one of them, and on the cover of it is like a steer skull, like a cow skull where it's got like the big horns coming out the side or whatever.
Yeah. And
he like comes up to me with the book and he holds up the cover. He's like, Mommy, don't you think that looks like a uterus? And I was like, Gabriel, that absolutely does kind of look like a uterus. I was like so proud.
That's
this
phenomenal.
Really weird way. Now my 6-year-old son not only knew the word uterus, but knew what it was, what it looked like, how it functioned. He melted my heart. I was just like, yeah, buddy, that does look like a uterus. You're absolutely correct.
Oh my gosh. That's phenomenal.
That was really cute.
I can't wait for the day when you get a call from the school and they're like,
oh my gosh.
Your children are going around saying certain things look like uteruses.
Well, like, here's the thing. It's so funny because Gabriel, especially, he's very, very smart. Like, we just had him like tested and stuff because he's like very bored in first grade. Yeah, so his teachers already stopped me. Nothing, like, we haven't gotten to that level yet, but his teachers do stop me sometimes, and they're just like, "You're never gonna guess what came out of his mouth today." And I'm just like, always holding my breath, like
oh no, what was it?
Oh no, what is he talking about today? And it's always usually something that's just like, oh, no big deal. It's like whatever, but it's going to happen one of these days, like no doubt. Where because we're like very open about like our bodies. We talk about our bodies. We use proper terminology. Like even my 2-year-old, like like knows the word penis and is like very comfortable using it. A little too comfortable, maybe, but it's like they know all this stuff. They're not like ashamed to ask questions about it, because we do kind of keep it very open for that reason. We don't want them to feel ashamed. But it's always like having to do that caveat though. But like, listen, you guys know you can't talk about this in school, right? Like this is a parent's job to tell their kids. It's not your job to tell your friends, like leave it up to their mommies and daddies to talk to them about it. Right. So it's like always this, like, this is what we do here and it's good. And it's, like we can talk about these things, but just keep it in the house right now.
Like, yeah. That's kind of the fine line that you walk, because I think Kathleen, you and I we're on the same track. Like you're a little bit ahead kids wise. Like my oldest is 2.5.
Right.
Of like, we plan to and already do use proper terminology, explain things as they are when our kids ask about them. And I think that that's so good. And it opens up exactly what you were just saying. It opens up the communication to where they're not like nervous to ask you about it, or, it allows it to be open conversation in the house, which is so good. But it is a fine line that we walk of trying to help them understand that, like, we talk this way, but what does prudence mean? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And what does it mean to be prudent about this terminology outside of the house?
Yes.
And that's a tough virtue to teach, 6-year-olds.
Yeah, no,
8-year-olds.
exactly.
I mean, that's a tough virtue to teach 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds.
No, you're exactly right. And I think it is like, we framed it in the sense of like responsibility, right? Like it is my, and we sort of frame everything in terms of like vocation and jobs like that we are gifted by God, right? So it's like, as your mother and your father, like it is our job. Like God has tasked us with this job of raising you guys and informing you and teaching you. And this is how we do that. But in the same way, your friends' parents are tasked with the same job. Mm-hmm. So it's a mommy and a daddy's job to teach you guys this stuff when they feel it's appropriate. It is not your job to go and teach anybody else until you have your own kids. Right. So it's like, that's kind of how we frame it all right now.
And that might change.
And yeah, they all kind of like know. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. It could, very well could down the line, but it's like, that's the beauty of it, is like by having the constant conversation about, oh, what's this thermometer for, mommy? Like, why do you do this every morning? Why do you keep this next to your bed? Why do you never have private bathroom time, so it's like little people are always walking in, and it's like, why are you looking at the toilet paper? Like,
okay,
what is that in your underwear?
My story time.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So yeah. So you never have private bathroom.
Segue.
So my daughter's 2.5 right now. And we potty trained her a little bit before 2. And now that she's getting a little bit older, now we're getting into the stage of like teaching her how to wipe herself and like, trying to like one step at a time, right? Like she knows when to tell us to go to the bathroom, but she can't really do anything else. Like working on pulling the pants down herself and like wiping herself. Right. And so I'm like trying to teach her how to wipe, and okay, you wipe from front to back, or, for her, it's like, it's down. Like that's sort of, what she can understand. And,
yeah.
And so I'm in the bathroom, and like, I obviously, like when I wipe, I take a look at the tissue paper, and sometimes I pinch it and pull something off, and then look at my fingers and pinch my fingers together. Right. Like, because you need to test your well, depending on the method.
Yeah, depending on what you do.
yeah, depending on what method you're using and like what you can look at from the tissue paper, you might pinch it off and look at its qualities, right? And so she sees me doing this. She's like, "Mommy, what are you doing?" Except she's like 2.5, so it wasn't that coherent of a sentence, right? And I was like, "Oh, mommy's checking her fertility," because I was like, "Man, I am not getting into like cervical mucus with a 2.5-year-old. Like that's a lot." And
there's stages,
yeah, there's stages. Like
you lead up to it.
Maybe when she's 5, we can talk about cervical mucus.
Yeah,
but like at 2.5, I'm like, whoa. And I was like, "I'm checking my fertility," and she's like, she just kind of took that. So then the next time that she goes to the bathroom and she's like, "Oh, Emma wants to wipe. Emma wants to wipe." So I like hand her a piece of toilet paper and she wipes down, and then she looks at the tissue paper and she pinches it and she says, "Emma's checking her fertility."
That is so cute. I love that.
It was so cute. And she kept doing that for a couple of weeks, and then she stopped, and then I think she saw me doing it again, so she like started again, So it is hilarious that she does that.
I find children just who like mimic adult things to be the most endearing moments in the world, especially when it's revolving around fertility.
Yeah.
It's like even cuter. It's 1,000 times cuter for some weird reason.
I think I told her, I was like, "I'm like, you don't really need to worry about checking your fertility for like maybe 10 years.
Yeah. You got a while, girl.
You got a while." But I was like, "Ah, whatever."
That is so cute. There was also, so I used Marquette postpartum, just for the postpartum period after having my 4th. And, so at that point I had the monitor in the bathroom all the time and the sticks. And so I got lots of questions about that too, when the kids would walk in and see it all. And I would explain, "Oh, well, hormones do different things in our bodies. And this monitor helps to detect, when the hormones are high and low and all this, and then tells me, whatever." And I don't know if I like said it was kind of like sort of like a superhero for me, kind of like I must have like explained something weird like that. I don't really remember exactly what. And the one morning I go into the bathroom and I find I kept the monitor like right next to the toilet area where there's like a windowsill and stuff. And I had it on the windowsill, and I go to grab my monitor, and there is just a straight up Captain America sticker, like on my monitor, like flying through the air, fist pumped out, like intense Captain America. And I was like, there it is, ladies and gentlemen.
There it is.
And you know what?
I
couldn't even
blue
take
fertility monitor, Captain America.
I know, it was like superhero
period.
fertility monitor. I couldn't even take the sticker off. I think it's still there, and I don't use the monitor anymore until, I'll use it again, postpartum after I have this baby. But it was just like, that's just like too good. Like, it's just, there's Captain America on my fertility monitor, like
that's fantastic. I would very much like to find, I'm going to like look through my daughter's stickers. And
yeah, you just gotta find a really good one that just like really,
her stickers are all girly and like
hard days.
Not as cool. Captain America
like, we're not even like super into superheroes, so I don't even know where we got a Captain America sticker, but clearly someone found it and was like, "This belongs on mom's thing," and there it is, and it stays to this day.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I recently started Marquette, and like when all of the stuff like arrived, first of all, I acted like a 2-year-old when all the stuff arrived, because I'm like, "Ooh, what's this? Ooh, what's this?" Like I'm like pulling it out of the box. It's like, "Oh, how am I going to use all these things?" Right? Like because I've like heard about Marquette for years, and like I understand essentially how it works, right? But I've never taken a class myself or used it myself. And I'm like, "Ooh, look at these test sticks, and ooh, how fun," And so like I'm going through the box, and then my daughter Emma comes in, and she is just fascinated. I mean, she loves when we get packages, like when we get Amazon packages.
And, oh yeah, for sure.
She's so funny whenever we take something out of a package, she like reacts like it is the coolest thing ever, regardless of what it is. But she just thinks it's so fun to open packages, right? Which like I can understand, right? And so she's like, I'm like pulling stuff out of the package. She's like, "Ooh, Ooh, how cool, Mom.
She has like no idea. She's like, this is so cool.
This is so cool.
Don't you love that like naive enthusiasm though? Like she's just so excited for you. She has zero clue.
Yeah.
She's just so happy for you.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, you gotta find people who give you that support.
Seriously. And maybe you have to
man.
make them like.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, some of the best parts about having kids.
Oh my gosh. Okay, what else do you have for NFP stories? I have one more.
Go ahead. You go with yours. I think I've hit my two funniest ones.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is gonna rock your world. Actually, I think I've already told you the story, but everybody who's listening, get ready for the best NFP story you've ever heard. I am not going to use names here.
Fair.
I'm not sure if this person listens to the podcast. But if they do, they'll know.
That's how you know
it's
it's a good story. Yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't really like my story.
Someone else's.
Okay. So I go to a play group once a week with some other Catholic moms, and I am so blessed to be in this play group with other Catholic moms, because like every once in a while, you know, we're like, you know, 1 minute we're talking about, okay, so how do you distract your kids? Like when you're trying to nurse the baby, like, what is it that you do? Do you turn on TV too? Like, am I a terrible mom for turning on TV? Right. So 1 minute we're talking about those conversations. And the next minute we're talking about the concept of double effect and moral theology. Right. So I love this play group.
Yeah. That sounds pretty great.
So anyway, so a couple weeks ago, we're at the park and we're talking, and one of the kids there like is showing off this drawing of this falcon. He's really into birds right now, and he's like, look at this cool falcon, and he's listing off all these falcon facts, and I'm like, wow, you're such a 5-year-old because you have all these falcon facts and they're like so random. Yeah. And so he's like so excited about this falcon, and then he wanted to put his drawing away and go play, and he didn't want his drawing to like get, you know, folded up or whatever. And so he had like brought it in like a little folder. And so he asked his mom to help him put it in the folder. And she was nursing her baby at the time. It's a group of Catholic moms. There's plenty of children around.
That's what we do.
And I was like, oh, I can help you put it in the folder. Right. So I like grab the piece of paper and I like open up the folder, and I like, in the process of like grabbing the piece of paper, I like flip it over to put it in the folder. And on the backside of this piece of paper, everybody take a moment to guess what's on the backside of the piece of paper. You know, this
I
is
did
an
hear
NFP
this story, so I know.
It's an NFP chart. And I died. I was just cracking up. Well, and what was funny is it's like I flipped over and I wasn't really looking, but it's like you see like one word and I think I saw the word cycle, like it was like, you know, length of last cycle or whatever. And then you know there's like graph paper. So
yes. Yeah.
It wasn't even a chart I had seen before. I'm not sure what method she uses, but I like saw it and I could tell immediately what it was. And I like make eye contact with the mom, and she and I just like there's like a 1-2, and then we just bust out laughing. Right. And so we're just,
I love that.
And I'm like, oh, this is so classic. Like,
and it's like that classic, like your kid wants to draw and you just grab whatever's near you. And it just like happens to be an NFP chart. You're just like, okay.
And that's why I shut on my phone, everybody. No.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
That is so good.
It was hilarious. I was just, to this day, like I'm laughing in my head right now. Like it was so funny.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you know what? When you find those people, it's just like, I don't know. It just like opens up this whole new like level of friendship, I feel, when it's like, you don't really know if they're like that into, you know, their faith, that they're like, you know, actually practicing NFP. Like those are like the hardcore people, right? Like it's like if you're practicing NFP, like, okay, like you're legit. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, but it's like this club, you know, it's like, there are still people, like plenty of like Catholic people who like really love their faith and stuff, but just totally not sold or on board with the NFP thing. So it's like, you're always like kind of walking this fine line. And then when you really like realize that like, oh my gosh, this new friend like also does NFP, it's like you're part of a club now, you know, and it's like, you're just new besties.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me of another story with this same moms group. So like the first time that I went to the moms group, they had already been meeting, and then like somebody told me about them, and I like joined their group. And so I'm like meeting everybody, and I had like seen a few of them went to my church, a few of them went to a different church. And so I'd like kind of seen some of them were doing introductions.
Yeah.
And one of the moms is like, "Hey, your name looks really familiar. Like, I feel like I saw it in the bulletin or something." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you probably saw one of my NFP intro courses in the bulletin." And she's like, "Oh yeah." And she's like, "How's NFP going?" Like, and what she meant to say was like, "How is it being an instructor?" And like, how's that going? Right. And she's like, "How's NFP going?" And I kind of look at her and I'm like, is that the question she meant to ask me? Like, is she trying to ask me like how charting's going right now? Cause I can launch into it because I'm postpartum. Like,
you're like, I would be happy to sit here for 2 hours and tell you.
Actually, I wasn't postpartum at the time I was pregnant, but yeah, I was like, but I could launch into it. And then she kind of looks at me and she's like, "Oh wait, I didn't mean to get that personal on our first meeting." Like,
that is really funny.
At that moment, I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, I think like all the women in this group practice NFP. Like, I found my people.
Yeah, exactly. That's like there's been so many times where I like find out like another person is Catholic, right? And you're just like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Like we can like talk about this, right? But you never know if you like start going into that conversation about like practicing NFP and stuff, like you're always risking like looking like the weirdo. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh well, yeah, no, I don't do that. You know, it's like that's a little too much, you know.
That's for the crazy Catholics.
Yeah, that's for like some crazy people. So it's like you're always still like, even though you might all be Catholic, like you're still like tiptoeing on that line. I remember, was it this year, one of my daughter's dance classes, and there was another mom there. It's her first year doing dance. So there was another mom that, you know, we had kind of just met, and we'd sit there each week, like waiting for our kids. And it came out that she was Catholic, and, you know, she like went to the church, one of the churches nearby and whatever. And so we're like kind of bonding over that each week. And we both had 4 kids, or have 4 kids. And so then there's one week, it was like, I don't know, maybe like 5 weeks of like sitting at dance class together. And one week, like one of us like crossed that line, like about NFP. We were just like, and it was like that moment where it's just like, I do NFP, you do NFP, you do NFP too. And it was like, all of a sudden we were just like, oh great, that's why you have 4 kids too. It's like, you know, we're all young, all these kids, like, it's like, obviously you do NFP.
Yeah, right.
So, but it's just like really funny. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we like sort of got off topic. Like,
that's okay. I mean,
stories and whatnot, but
maybe I'll just change the name of this episode to just be
there you go. It's
living
just, you know,
NFP stories in general. Well, that's so funny because I have a good friend of mine that like I was meeting up for coffee. There was supposed to be this like group of Catholic moms that were meeting up for coffee. And so I'm like so excited. And this was a couple of years ago. And at the time, like, I think my daughter, who's 2.5 now, was like maybe 2 months or something. Like, yeah. So I'm super excited. I'm going to go meet these Catholic moms, because now I'm a Catholic mom. And, you know, and I get there and only one other mom shows up. And I'm like, yeah, no, this was supposed to be this like great meeting of multiple Catholic moms. And then, I mean, probably within like 10 minutes of meeting, we somehow like got onto the topic of NFP. And then we talked for like 2.5 hours about NFP, like right outside of this coffee shop. People walking by probably were like, what did they just say cervical mucus? Like, yeah. Are they talking about ovulation? My gosh. Like, what the heck?
I did one of my practice teaching sessions with a friend for, you know, learning to teach femme and whatnot. I did one of my practice teaching sessions. We met at a bar because she lives like a couple hours away. So we like met halfway.
Solid.
We literally met at a bar, and like, we didn't even get seated at a table. We got sat at the bar. We were set, and it was like someone eventually like comes next to us, and I'm like talking all about cervical mucus. And of course there's like people, it's like there's screens and, you know, like all this stuff. It was not an ideal place to meet for this session. It was like actually we had planned to meet at a Starbucks, but then the Starbucks the inside was closed. So I was like, oh, where the heck do we go now? And the bar was like the next closest thing. So don't recommend it. But it was so funny because, you know, there's like people talking really loud, and there's like, you know, TV screens on and like all this sort of stuff. And these people literally right next to me, and you have to yell to like be heard. So you're just like, cervical mucus, when you're looking estrogenic mucus versus gestogenic. It's like you're talking about all these things. You're just like, wow, this is some kind of evangelization, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh my God, screaming about cervical mucus.
All right, so now that we've sort of gotten off of like kids and NFP, and now we're just sort of on like general NFP stories. I'm going to tell this one, and then we should probably wrap up this episode. All right, so I'm at a wedding a couple of months ago, and it's like, this is like later into the reception, you know, things have kind of calmed down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in this group of people, and first off, I had like this was a first time moment, right? So I'm like meeting these people, and I knew some of them from high school, and because it's a wedding, right? Like, you know half the people you talk to, right? And this girl's like, oh, Ellen Holloway. Oh, I listened to your podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like,
that is so funny.
Shut the front door, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, everybody's like, what's your podcast? Blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, start talking about NFP. And so this group that I'm talking in is a group of women plus like one husband of like a woman in that group who uses NFP, right? So it was like the people in this group, it's very natural to talk about these things. So we're talking, and like one of the girls in the group doesn't use NFP, and she's kind of like, wait, tell me more. Like, I'm kind of interested in charting, you know? So we're talking about cervical mucus. And right at the moment where I like start getting into cervical mucus, of course, this groomsman who was like in a different conversation nearby turns into our group. And we all kind of look at, like, we pause when he turns in, right? And like, hi, you know, and he's like, what are we talking about?
You're like, do you want to know?
And we all just bust out laughing. And I was like, I mean, if you want to know, I'll get into it with you, right?
Funny.
He's like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, we're talking about cervical mucus. Would you like to learn more? And he's like, what is this? You know? And then he's like fascinated because I kind of like, in 30 seconds explain the like fertility cycle, and he's like, what? This is fascinating, you know? And like, this poor groomsman.
Funny. I love that. You know, isn't it like amazing? Like, nobody knows about a general fertility cycle, and that's a whole other tangent. I won't even go into it. But oh my gosh, there have been so many situations that it's been like the same thing. It's just like, they just kind of like give like like you said, like the quick like 30-second overview of what a fertility cycle is, and they're just like, wait a minute. Like, so women can't get pregnant like all the time? And I was like, no.
No, they can't.
And nobody knows that. It's like crazy.
Oh my gosh. I think I hope that you guys listening to this episode can just kind of walk away from this and realize that living NFP in your life can just result in so many funny opportunities, and really like embrace the laugh, embrace the awkwardness if it's an awkward thing. And if it has to do with your kids, like, just be straight up with them.
Be honest and open.
Use the real words. Tell them what you're doing. You know, if you're testing your pee with a stick, like, explain what you're doing. And then if they ask if they can do it, explain why it doesn't make sense for them to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I think that is such an important point, because like the body is like such a mystery to us, right? Like, and it has been for so long. And I think that to start to dispel that mystery with our kids as they're young, so that as they grow and they begin to learn more, you know, that they can just automatically like have this natural understanding. And I don't know, I think it's so important, and it kind of gives them a leg up in really being prepared to kind of handle there's so many issues around bodies and stuff that they're going to have to be dealing with, sooner rather than later, that we don't really, it's hard to feel like you can really properly prepare them. But if you can just be having those honest, open conversations, reminding them all the time that the body is good, reminding them that the body is not disgusting, it's not gross, that all of these things are intended by God for a purpose, and just, get them on board with that idea of mystery and intentionality. I think it just automatically sets them up for understanding a lot of really important things that are very easily misunderstood as they get older.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree. And I think something I want to end on is it's really hard to protect and honor something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you think about someone who's not Catholic and the Eucharist, they don't know how to protect and honor it because they don't understand it. They don't understand the brevity, I don't know if brevity is the word that I'm looking for, but they don't understand like the importance,
the weight of it, the weight
of the Eucharist. Right. And so if your son or daughter growing up doesn't understand their body, then they're very likely not going to honor and protect it.
Yeah.
But if they understand it and they understand how important it is, then it's a lot easier to have a conviction to honor and protect your body.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right. Awesome.
That's a wrap.
This was great story sharing. I loved it.
Just fun, lighthearted,
fun, lighthearted.
We're all in this together.
A lot of the episodes that we had been recording were like really intense, which I got such great feedback, especially from the chastity episode, of just like, oh, like that was such good info. But Kathleen and I were kind of like, we just need to record like something fun and a little bit more trivial because
for a little bit.
These were intense.
Exactly. So thanks for humoring us with our humor.
Exactly. And if you're not following Trending Toward Intimacy on Instagram, be sure to check us out. If you want to reach out to Kathleen or I, send me an email. Links to those are in the show notes. Until next time.
See you guys.